Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Costa, and I am co-chairing the expert working group end user of the BEREC, together with Bogdan Tospinescu, who has opened the floor today. This session will be focusing on designing for all a manufacturers and service providers challenge, and we will start with a presentation of Mr. Thomas Barmuller, who is the director for Europe, Middle East, and Africa of the Mobile Manufacturers Forum. This is an international association of telecommunications equipment manufacturers that has an interest in mobile or wireless communication. As director for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, Mr. Barmuller is responsible for the operational and strategic management of the Mobile Manufacturers Forum activities in all this region, government advocacy, stakeholder relations, and public communication on behalf of the industry. Prior to joining the Mobile Manufacturers Forum, he was the managing director of the Austrian forum Mobile Kommunikation from 2000 to 2006. Before, he also served as a member of the Austrian Federal Parliament from 1990 to 1999, and he was already focusing in infrastructure issues, telecommunications, renewable energy, and the environment. Thomas, please. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for this introduction. It's always interesting to hear your own history. And I'm very pleased that you also mentioned that I served as a member of the parliament, but I can assure you that it was in the last century already. So I was quite interested in this discussion you had before on striking the right balance in terms of legislation and who moves when. But actually this is now an example of a solution that the producers of mobile communications equipment put into place just because we think that this is an important issue. And it was already mentioned what we stand for. I would also like to mention that we started off, and this is still our core issue, EMF and health, but we have also taken on board all the anti-counterfeit measures and then also GARI, as it is mentioned here, as the Global Accessibility Reporting Initiative. Our members are also mentioned on the slide, and we more or less cover about 70–80% of worldwide handset sales. And I think this is important because it means that GARI could develop, if the support is right, could develop into some kind of real standard for the industry as well. It was already mentioned by Rodolfo Cadani at the very beginning that when we talk about accessibility of equipment, then this is not only a kind of responsibility, it's also a business opportunity. But I took this particular quote from the, unfortunately the slides are not shown correctly. Is there any chance that we could switch that to a way that everything is shown on the slide? Because now the lower part is cut off. I'm looking at the technician, no, okay. Well, it is a quote that stems from, I'm now going to prove that I know my slides. This is a quote that stems from the Zero project in Vienna, the conference of in 2013, and I think it is important to mention that for people with disabilities, accessibility makes things really possible. It doesn't make the things easier as it for many others is, but it makes things possible. And this is not only a responsibility, it is also a real opportunity, business opportunity. Now, GARI stands for Global Accessibility Reporting Initiative, and this really means global. It's not just we want to have a global initiative. It is really a global initiative, what we have put into place. While we cover in the Global Accessibility Reporting Initiative more than 100 accessibility features, we also have now more than 1,100 mobile devices on our database, and we cover all world regions. Now, it is a centralized source of information, and what we have added after the last meeting, BEREC meeting 2 years ago, is a separate section for applications. And we have now more than 200 applications on the net, and they are linked with the devices you can find there, so people can not only search for a certain device which fits their needs, but also for those applications that work with the device. And we think that's a very important connection that we have made since then. By doing so, it becomes some kind of a source for consumer guidance. But we also use it for our companies to provide reportings and reports to to standardization bodies or to authorities in other countries. So I think it's quite wise to cover both, not only the information part, but also the reporting part, because if we fit that together, then everyone will benefit from it, and it also means that it's not such a burden if you have to put that up. And then I think what we are particularly proud of is it's already provided in 14 different languages, written languages, and in American Sign Language. So, and I mentioned it, the project was presented in 2013 at the last BEREC workshop, and as a result of that, I can say that the Romanian operator uses this information, the GARI information, on the website. We had the chance to talk to the Irish regulator in a telephone conference and presented GARI to their the forum, the Disability Forum is the correct name. And I think that was really a great chance that derived from the presentation in 2013. So I still would like to mention we are happy about the progress we made, but we would like to see more progress in this field. And if you could tell me perhaps afterwards what we need to do to get this thing implemented, to get GARI implemented also on other websites, because I'm proud to say the FCC uses the GARI data to go ahead with their accessibility house. And I think that is a very important issue, because it shows also to people that this information is reliable. We can use it also for regulatory purposes. Now, the central purpose of GARI is to provide consumers with information about devices that fit their needs. That's the central point. And this is just a screenshot of the website, and you see here 3 different parts. We have mobile phones on there, tablets, and mobile apps. And when you, for example, go to the mobile phones and tablets search function, then you could here just go for a pre-selected group of features, which then relate to dexterity, vision, hearing, cognition. Then you decide whether you want to look up phones or tablets. You have to go for the region, and then you can search the device, or you can go in this section and then really enter a certain device and look up the accessibility features of this device. Or if you think I want to have my own selections, then you go directly into the list of the more than 100 features, accessibility features, tick the features you want to see, and then the entire database, all the more than 1,100 models are searched, and you get a list. You get a list of mobile phones according to the matches you get. You know, here down here you see 80% match, depending on what you have just typed in. And it's not only that you get the entire database ranked, you can then go for a certain product, or you could even select up to 3 different products in order to have a comparison, an online comparison. We always recommend that people narrow down their choice by using GARI, but we also recommend that they then take this list and go to the shop and look at the real physical handling and feeling of the device before making a decision. And it was mentioned by the presenter from Vodafone that it is a difficulty for the people in the shops to always stay up to date with all these necessities they have and to have all the information at hand. While this is available publicly on the internet, it should be easy to just access GARI, to type in whatever you want to know, and then find the list and the description of the devices. So we would be happy if this is used more also from operators and not only from regulators and NGOs. And by the way, I really have to thank also EDF for the long-lasting cooperation we have established, because that is always of help. It was just mentioned that my colleague Sabine Lobnig presented GARI last weekend, I think, the weekend before last weekend in your last meeting. And I think we really have established a good relationship, also based on the fact that on a yearly basis, we go ahead and make a review. We invite all people, all stakeholders, all organizations who are interested in this topic to provide us with comments, and then we try on a yearly basis to change GARI in order to fit the needs better. Now, when I put up this slide, then it's just that you anyway know accessibility is about hardware, is about software, but it becomes more and more also a question of third-party apps. And I think we should not forget about them. And here this slide just proves that desktop users already not of such a great number anymore than mobile users. And this will, of course, go ahead. And when mobile users access the internet, then they do this mainly, as you can see here, this is from 2013, that's from 2014. Then they do this mainly via mobile apps. And this is the reason why we included mobile apps and why we encourage those who want to have an additional platform, further mobile applications, to also enter them into GARI. Now, last time in 2013, the MMF offered cooperation. I think we have proven that this is not just a short-term issue for us, but really, in the meantime, a successful initiative. And this is why I would like to slightly change my request today. We not only offer cooperation, we also request cooperation. I think it is the time that we can implement that as widely as possible in order to make the information available. It is necessary to talk about what drives innovation and to what extent is legislation needed to get that done. But I think it is worthwhile to say what we already have in place and is of such quality should be used, because it will immediately help people to fit their needs and to find what they are looking for. It does not mean that we are not going to have any further legislation on that, but what is available we should really implement and make available for as many as possible. Now, what we strive for is we would like to have one global database, and we have just talked about it beforehand, that actually we started not only to think about including tagged phones into GARI as well, that was a suggestion by the Australian regulator, but also with the Internet of Things ahead, I think it is worthwhile to also think about other devices as well. TVs would be somehow a natural next step. So we are in an internal process of thinking about it, which is why we can say it could be really one global database for accessibility requirements in all markets. And then again, it could be a real centralized platform on mobile accessibility. Again, mobile, think about it in brackets already. It could be much more than this. And then it would fit the three points mentioned here. It would promote accessibility. It could, again, used as a reporting tool for the manufacturers. It could be used as a consumer guidance tool, not only for the consumer directly, but also for shops and retailers. And then it could develop into a platform for exchange of information between stakeholders. Now that is what we offer, and this is a quite busy slide, but I just wanted to show you there are a lot of cooperation partners as well already. Believe it or not, AT&T is one of them, but also the FCC, ANCOM. We have, again, it's not only NGOs, it's authorities, it's about a lot of different people and organizations, and we are proud of that. And even down here, you might not see it because of my colleague sitting in front of here, it's SAICA. SAICA is an organization in South Africa, so even African countries have started to use and to implement GARI, and I think this proves that it is really a worldwide initiative. So these are our contact details if you would like to get in touch with us, and I think I have taken up 11 minutes and would like to hand over to our facilitator again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will continue with Guido Guidos. He's an independent ICT expert working at the forefront of digital technologies for desktop and mobile, with a special interest in internet applications, usability, and user-focused design. He has been also an expert working very actively in the CEN-CENELEC standardization work in execution of the European Union mandate M473 to include design for all in all standardization initiatives. Please.
Thank you. I think I've just nicked the controller of my colleague here, so apologies for that. Good afternoon, everybody, and well done for lasting so long, even into after the lunch hour slot. So I've managed to be frightfully rude to the AT&T chap earlier on. It is quite possible that by the end of my presentation I've offended most, if not all of you, so I do apologize up front for that. I'm from a very technical background, so I have no real, let's see if I can get this to work. I have not much social skills, so you need to bear that in mind while I make my presentation. Just very quickly, a bit of propaganda about myself, because for the last 5 years I've now been self-employed, I'm independent, but I do come from an information and communication technology background, and particularly in innovation. So my work has been actually for most of my career in research, development, innovation, products and services. But I have also spent in between when I started and what I'm doing right now, and by the way, what I'm doing right now has a lot to do with things like cloud computing these days. I have spent 9 years as the Director of New Technologies at the Royal National Institute for Deaf People in the UK, where I was driving innovation. It was all externally facing work, but gave me a slightly different perspective on all of these things. And so I do have built up some expertise in this field of user experience and inclusion. And I'm currently, and this is one of the things I will be talking to you about, an appointed expert to task groups 1 and 3 in execution of European mandate M473 Design for All, which is a mandate that focuses specifically on furthering accessibility following a design for all approach. And which has a big standardization component. And so standardization is another one of those activities that I have been deeply involved in. I've done standardizations, I've edited and written standards in IETF, BSI, the IEC, ETSI, CEN and CENELEC. So it gives me an interesting perspective on how standards can help drive accessibility. And so I have this mix of kind of business expertise and third sector expertise, if you like. Now, having been frightfully rude to the AT&T chap is one thing. I'm going to have to be a bit rude about some of my other messages as well, not because I particularly want to, and not because I don't think there are not real good messages to be given, but it's not my role today to just do the PR thing and talk about everything that's nice. It is to highlight a little bit on where the issues are, where the challenges are for industry, for regulators, but also for user organizations. And this next slide really talks about a systemic failure, which I consider to be a recurring, ongoing problem in regulation and in deployment, to preempt. And what I mean by that is to try and address accessibility from the earliest stages of design and implementation. And this is really key. As I said, I'm a technology person, and if somebody comes to us, engineers or computer scientists, and they describe a problem, then we tend to be quite good at going and thinking about it and trying to resolve it and how we could fix this in our code or in our hardware. But if this problem is only raised once we've built something, it becomes really, really difficult to retrofit a whole lot of new functionality into software or hardware. And unfortunately, one of the things that regulation has not been very good at consistently over the last 20, 30 years is to to use a nice management buzzword, to be proactive about it and try to address some of these issues up front rather than afterwards. And it means also that some of the lessons about unless you cater for some of these basic features and these things to do with accessibility up front, you keep going to be making the same mistakes and having to fix the problem afterwards, which is more complex, which comes at a greater cost, and which has all sorts of other implications that you could avoid if you do it early on. So you get into some kind of vicious circle there, whereby you don't consider it early enough, so then it becomes too complex, too expensive to fix, and now we're going to repeat the same cycle again and again. So there is a key issue here around the strategy that regulators and also policymakers follow in terms of addressing accessibility. There is also an issue with not considering users sufficiently. So a systemic failure, if you like, to focus on users. I think in too many cases, users are unknown and thereby a bit unloved, right? And I'm not just talking about the users who currently use a product or service. We're also, and in particular, talking about which are the kind of the users or the consumers that currently face barriers, and as a result of that might not be current users, but very well could be, with some modifications, become users and change the picture. And I think a lot of people in industry, in regulation, in policy, do not understand the issues around accessibility, around usability, around the strategies for extending the range of users sufficiently to be able to recognize this potential. In the same way that often user organizations don't recognize the real-world constraints that businesses and regulators have to operate in that might make something possible or not possible. But you get stuck in this kind of fallacy, in this mistake that improving accessibility and usability is always expensive. It is always very difficult, if not impossible, and it only addresses the issues for a minority of users. There are some really difficult problems out there, okay? So not everything can be magically resolved or wished away. There are some real issues that are difficult. But a lot of the stuff where we face specific barriers today can actually be resolved if you do it in the right way, if you tackle the problem early enough. I think user organizations, as I said, also have a responsibility here in order to be looking forward, to try and embrace change and the innovation that technology can bring, rather than, as they sometimes do, try to perpetuate legacy, obsolete solutions and niche technologies which come with a lot of stigma and a lot of other issues associated with it. So there are responsibilities there on all players. As I said, an early focus on user needs and on innovation are key if you want to move on. I think business and regulators actually think that because we've done something in a certain way, we should continue to do it in that way. That is really not an ethos of being innovative in business and moving ahead. So I think that is something to address. And the simple observation around all of this is that if you look out at the products and the services out there in the real world, you see that a growing number of people face substantial difficulty in accessing, understanding, and using products and services. Connected TVs is one of the areas I'm deeply involved with, and where this is quite apparent, because there is a failure there for many of the buyers of connected TVs to actually use the full potential of these products and get access to all these services that would potentially very much enrich their lives and indeed can contribute to better accessibility. So what then is Design for All as a means, if you like, to start addressing some of these issues I've set out? If you want the complex political explanation, then it is what's on the slide at my first point. It is design for human diversity, social inclusion and equality. Design for All aims to enable all people to have equal opportunities to participate in every aspect of society. The plain language Guido version of this is Design for All is know your user and use that knowledge in the design of your products and services. It is not more complicated than that. So you would seek to continuously extend the range of users who can access, understand, and use mainstream products, goods, and services. I use the phrase mainstream here because I think intuitively you know what I mean, but do bear in mind it's not necessarily something that is very specifically defined anywhere. But it is about all the stuff around us which we all want and use to make that accessible to the widest range of users possible. And Design for All is certainly forward-looking. It is not looking backward. It's trying to do things differently and use new technologies and new methods that we have available to achieve new things. What Design for All is not is this notion that it's a one-size-fits-all solution where, you know, the bit of the communist view where everything looks the same and you can have any car you want as long as it's white and it's got two doors, right? So it's not one-size-fits-all. It is recognizing that different people need different things. It will not make assistive technologies disappear. This is something I have to be upfront about. So the idea, for example, that if you design everything according to a Design for All methodology, then no assistive technologies are further needed is just not true. There are some parts of the spectrum where you need a highly specialized solution that by definition, by being highly specialized, doesn't sit in your mainstream. What is key, though, is that you design your mainstream products and services so that they can interoperate where needed with those assistive technologies in the correct way and without causing the user limitations in terms of what they can do. It's not a certain type of process or management fad. I do sometimes give up when I see these, you know, the Taliban coming by and saying, this is my Design for All methodology or my universal design methodology, and it is called A, B, and C, and this is what you shall use. So it is, as I said, nothing more than thinking about who is my user and how can I meet their needs. And anything that tries to push you into a certain buzzword or fad du jour so that that's what you need to do and you need to do it in this certain way, I think is not Design for All. It's not something that's impossible to do. It's not something that is too expensive to do. And it's not something that should be perpetuating niche legacy technologies. Now, as I said before, I'm involved in a project that is actually of interest to pretty much most of you around the table here, which is a European mandate, Mandate M473, Design for All. which is a standardization mandate to Senelec and ETSI. So it is really very much focused on standards and on developing standards to drive accessibility following a design-for-all approach in mainstream products, goods and services. The policy context, I think, of this is known. It's a long-standing European policy context around no discrimination, full citizenship, full participation of people with disabilities and older people, and saying that this participation requires full access to goods, products and services, and it uses design for all as a means to achieve that particular policy context. We've spoken a few times today already about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Well, this is one of the key policy instruments that the mandate refers to. The existence of this mandate to some extent indicates that policymakers in Europe are unhappy about the current state of affairs. So we are saying, as policymakers, as user groups and others, there is a problem that needs to be addressed. It is not intended to develop specific accessibility standards. So in that sense, it's quite different from things like Mandate 376 or the EN 301-549 that we earlier heard about. It is a quite different approach. We are actually going for a horizontal process-driven approach. It will not be publishing technical specification, and it explicitly recognizes the need for a continued role for assistive technologies. I'll briefly highlight two key deliverables of this, which are of direct interest to you and to regulators. The first one is what is called in the mandate deliverable D1.1. So it's a process for integrating accessibility into the standardization processes themselves. The development of a procedure, a protocol as we call it, in deliverable D1.1, to guide standardization bodies, ETSI, CEN, Senelec in particular, obviously, through a process to decide whether accessibility should be an issue to address when they review an existing standard or when they are developing new standards. The mandate also specifically tells us that this particular standard process, the protocol we're developing, should function as a tool that standards bodies will be using. It sets out, it needs to be easy to use, etc., but it is really about the standards process itself. So in effect, any of you who are involved in any level of standardization will see that, like with things like health and safety, the environment and other such stuff, the topic of accessibility will be introduced in the standards process itself. And this is key to addressing what I said at the start of my presentation about early intervention, considering design for all and user needs at the earliest possible stages of design and development. The second deliverable that I need to point out is a more externally facing deliverable. It's called D4.1. It's a new standard, so it will be an EN, a European standard, that describes how the goods manufacturing industry and public and private service entities in their processes can consider accessibility following design for all approach with due consideration for assistive technologies and services that could help bridge the usage gap of the product or service. What this really means is that this will be a management system standard type of process that applies horizontally across all products, goods and services. And in the same way as things like ISO 9001 quality or 14,000 or 27,000, any of these other process management system standards are used to define the process in an organization that leads to certain outcomes, the intention is to do the same thing with deliverable 4.1. It should deal with different types of process-related standards widely used, such as management system standards. And this is an important aspect of this, because what it means is that instead of doing something completely new, what we're saying is we're overlaying this whole issue of accessibility following a design-for-all approach on already existing, widely accepted, widely used, widely recognized processes by which organizations plan, design, develop, produce, manufacture their products, goods, and services. Now, in order to be successful with this notion of accessibility following a design-for-all approach, I think there are some key things that you need to realize in your organization. So a commitment by decision makers is key. If the board and the management structure isn't on board with what you're trying to do, it's not going to happen. It needs to be something that's integrated in an existing management system process approach. So it cannot be something that is completely alien to how business goes about what they do. It needs to fit existing business practices and existing business realities, including some of the constraints, financially, technologically wise, and so on. As I said before, it is essential that this is applied from the earliest stages of planning and design. It needs to be seen as something that is positive and improving the quality of products, goods and services, and that harnesses existing expertise, shares best practice, and builds up knowledge around all of this. It makes business sense, not just because of this point that we've heard today a few times, that the demographic trend in the UK is one of an increased aged and diversified society, and therefore all organizations should be seeking to align their products, goods and services to meet the needs of the widest range of users. But also because doing this and designing products and thinking creatively about how your products work and your services are realized is an opportunity for innovation and an incentive, to change what you do. It gives you a competitive edge if you do this right. And I've got a quote here from a German paper on this particular topic that says, products, goods and services created in this way stand out not just because of their aesthetic qualities, but very much also because they are particularly easy and comfortable to use. And there is therefore great general benefit in designing things that people of the widest range of abilities and preferences can successfully use and benefit for. And so to wrap up, where the title that I was given for the session this afternoon was Designing for All as a Manufacturers and Service Providers Challenge, I would propose we should really change this into this is an opportunity. So rather than looking at it as a negative thing, we can look at it as something positive that can contribute to the right outcomes for all those involved in the debate. I probably have taken up already enough of your time, so thank you very much for your attention, and I hope I haven't offended too many of you.
Thank you. So our next speaker will be Damir Filipovic, which is Director for European Public Affairs of Samsung, but he is here in his capacity of member of Digital Europe, where he represents the digital technology industry in Europe and ensures industry participation in the development and implementation of European Union policies. Thank you, Damir.
Thank you. So, on some occasions, Thomas and myself here are some sort of a double act because he's covering mobile side, I'm trying to cover more consumer electronics side, and usually it works well. So I hope I will not disappoint you today because he also usually have very good presentations. So it's, I have to say, very hard to outdo him in a way. Guido also mentioned a couple of points which I think are very important, and I think that our presentations will all in a way fit together because we are not necessarily talking about exactly same things, but each of these is part of the bigger picture, and out of this I think we can have enough for further discussions and to see actually how things can be improved. Also, like Thomas, 2 years ago I was standing in front of you giving very similar presentations. We have some updates. You may discuss whether it is enough, whether we could do it different, we can do it more or less better or faster, but things are changing, and I hope that you will basically take some of this out of the presentation, because many of these things are similar, but there are also, I would say, hopefully some also different messages. So first, very briefly about Digital Europe. So we believe that Digital Europe is the biggest European ICT trade association. We have mixed membership. We have around 60 corporate members and around 40 national trade associations, which also employs a lot of SMEs in the EU, European Economic Area, and I would say wider Europe. So we believe that we have enough, I would say, participation and experience and enough of the good mix of the members that we can kind of be very important and knowledgeable, let's say, party in these discussions. So what is our vision for what we like to call for inclusion? Is first of all to ensure that industry can provide accessible goods and services, and that this is available to the widest possible, I would say, a number of people, both people with disabilities and elderly people in the European Union, and also, of course, that this is all done in, I would say, most innovative and modern way at the moment. So we definitely want that all Europeans have access to the digital technologies, and we hope that at least through initiatives like Gary, that we are also quite, I would say, supportive, because we have a lot of overlap of the members. So of course we're not duplicating in two associations the same work, but we are, let's say, supporting as representing companies in both association work, both from the mobile side and consumer electronics side. So we believe that this is a kind of a good mix, covering also, again, this from the European perspective, but also global perspective. So, next one. So what we basically want to share today is what we try to do in a side of the digital television. So you know that basically in less than 10 years ago, there was a lot of discussion about switch from the analog to digital television. It brought a lot of opportunities in many areas. And one of these, we believe, is also accessibility. So what we try to do in partnership with the European Commission and our partners from user groups and user associations, which you will see a bit later, to develop some sort of features that might be useful for people with disabilities and for the elderly people. And you can see that there are two broad, I would say, groups of this. First is related to accessible navigation. This is, I would say, more related to device itself. Second part is what we called accessibility in broadcast programs, which was more, I would say, related to the content that is, let's say, broadcasted or accessed through the device. You have the list here. I would say there is no particular surprise. A bit of, I would say, two newish things is implementation of text-to-speech and clean audio. On the next slide, you will see, oh, sorry. These are some of the examples how some of these features kind of look like, or what it is all about. And then, sorry, what's happening here? That's strange. Okay. So the point here is basically that we try to achieve this through the platform that we have with European Disability Forum and their partners like ONS, RNIB and Swedish Disability Federation and European Commission. It started in 2007. It was mostly implemented as of 2009, plus some of these additions. You see one of these, that liaison with the European Blind Union basically led to the international standard for text-to-speech, which was approved basically in 2013, and then subsequently implemented in the next, I would say, next versions of our devices. And besides the partners that we mentioned here, we try to expand our cooperation, not just to I would say, that sort of cooperation platform, but also with the broader partnerships. You see that we have the European Broadcasting Union, with the Digitech, Mobile Manufacturers Forum, ITI and CEA in the US, because one of our points that we will make later on is that everything that is done should hopefully for us as manufacturers have a global dimension, because we believe that it is not about Europe-specific, US-specific. More or less, like some of you are also mentioning, problems are pretty much the same. And we are all, how to say, we are all people. So it's not that there are such a great differences. There may be some particular specific issues that may have some specific solutions. But overall speaking, there is no particular need to, in that sense, distinguish in geographies. This is why we believe that all the solutions that we have or that we should have should be based on a globally kind of agreed solutions. And this is why we have this broader partnership. You see that these are also institutions like ITU, but also a lot of standardization institutions. So we also actively work on the standards, and you will see basically on a later stages what this comprises. And this is actually a lot of works that we are, let's say, contributing on a daily basis. So what we consider as achievements of all this work is basically to have subtitling in all TV sets. So nothing special, you can say. Audio description in majority of TV sets. So not yet all, but majority. And then what we call attention for usability, like special menus, special buttons, manuals, operating instructions. And then, of course, we have now first TVs with voice and gesture control that are also introduced in the market. We started, I think, somewhere in the beginning of 2013, and now it becomes basically mainstream product. What I mentioned on standardization is some sort of work goes on, so it's not all done. So we do this and then nothing happens. So there is a lot of, you can see, standardization work. Someone would say, okay, why standards? At the end of the day, like I think also Guido mentioned, is that even if you have this, let's say, design for all as a principle, which is fine, it has to be somehow hopefully reflected in everyday life and in the devices. If you don't have it, and then subsequently in services and perhaps other products. So standardization is one of the ways that we saw as a very useful to work with other stakeholders, to cooperate, and then use this experience that we build through this self-commitment and work through this standardization to get even some I would say, better result. You see some of this, which is not particularly, I would say, new, but it's just a kind of nice list to show how this work goes, and this is not something that is just kind of, nice talk, we go around, we see, we will do this or we do this. It's kind of ongoing and continuous work. And then we have also, on the next slide is what we also already mentioned, both standards that we also try to work on together on some of this with our colleagues from the US, and trying to make this, I would say, as global as possible. But of course, we understand that there are some let's say, European specificities, and at the end of the day, these are the mandates of the European Commission. Besides standardization work, what we also try to do is to broaden our, I would say, both network and our work also through the various projects. And you can see on the next slide what are just a couple of these examples. So we try to basically work also within these projects and provide our cooperation there. You will see also that there is now, I would say, a bit newish project on accessibility basically in media, and then also projects related to HBB TV and connected TV. So these are, I would say, some sort of connectivity additions to the classical TV devices. So now we are adding connectivity to internet. With connectivity to internet, we have applications. So this is why I think also Thomas was mentioning that once you have this, I would say, mobility factor, you can now also consider television as not just static, I would say, dummy device, but it becomes a bit smarter and smarter. And with this, of course, some possibilities arises. And we also are thinking now how this can be applied in domain of accessibility. And then subsequently, we will see whether it will be possible to do something similar like Gary is doing today for mobile, for other, I would say, connectable devices. And then what we basically see as, I would say, 4 points from our view at the moment. This is, first of all, demand. What we mean by no large market demand for accessible products is we consider this in a sense that although everybody is speaking about, EU market, 500 million and so on, when you boil down basically this to what we have to face on day-to-day basis in various EU and European countries, it doesn't look always as one big European market. And therefore, it's very hard for us that now we are coming and saying, okay, on these still relatively fragmented markets, now we should do this in order to, let's say, initiate some sort of the demand. We are not saying that this is not there, that we shouldn't work on that we don't see any opportunities. We just say that this is still a bit, I would say, fragmented side, which leads us to the second one. This is economy of scale. Like I said, we try to do global products. We don't see particular need to develop something very specific to Europe if there is no very good reason for it. We believe that there are enough of the globalized approaches and standards that could be pretty much applicable to Europe. We just have, I think, to communicate this fact and work how this could be, I would say, adapted to European situation. Then the other thing is, which is always, I would say, constant questions that we are repeating, I would say, like parrots for many years. And this is also that whole value chain needs to be included, I would say, in a similar, or even, we could even say on the same level, because if just some parts of the value chain deliver on let's say, some parts of the features, and the others are not following in the same way, you always have certain gap, and there are always some kind of questions. There is room for interpretation, some sort of the blame game. This doesn't help. So we believe that we need to really work together, that all basically parts of the value chain are contributing to development of the accessibility features, both for products and services, or you can say for content. And then, of course, we believe that industry-led initiatives so far, I would say, in principle, delivered. We are not saying that there is no room for do anything else, but what we believe is that what we see so far in practice is that there is a lot of speak from, not so much from regulators, but let's say policymakers, oh, we need to do something, there are some problems and so on. But when it comes to clear definition, okay, what exactly is the problem, and when we see the studies and impact assessments and so on, then it comes to show that there is some sort of inability, this, I would say, it's a bit funny to use, but disability of the policymakers to show what is the real problem and how this should be handled. So what we are trying to do is to say, okay, we understand that there is a need, there are some open issues, so no one is saying, oh yes, everything is great, no problem. Things are evolving. And the other thing with the policy, what we basically notice is that policy is always somehow kind of lagging behind, with the real life. So products are developed, technologies are coming, cycles are quite fast. It simply moves on, and with this also the wishes and I would say needs of the users. And of course we have to kind of work with that, and this is why we believe that if industry continuously start to work both with the regulators, with civil society, with user groups, I think we can deliver much better results than just to have, okay, now we have one size fits all regulation, you have this and do this. So, and then of course, if then, and by the way, of course, based on the global standards, that's I think very important notion here. And then of course, if something shows that this is a real problem, it is not solved in a proper way, fine, let's see this. What I think definitely policymakers in Europe could help is if there is any, I would say, sort of fragmentation or different interpretation of same or similar things, that would be helpful to have some sort of pan-European approach that these types of the fragmentation are avoided. Why we are a bit wary on regulation? Because we saw on many occasions that there are some sort of nice wish list from the side of the European Commission. They may have even noble and good idea, but when it comes to legislative process and then subsequently to implementation in the member states, that becomes a serious sort of, I would say, distortions and fragmentations, rather than actually supporting, I would say, solutions and some sort of let's say, benefits for the users. And last but not least, we are open for the cooperation. You will have, without any I would say, hesitation, our contacts, and we would be happy to cooperate, to hear basically what are your opinions, how we can work together, both with the regulators, with the policymakers, with civil society. We already have in a coffee break some sort of discussion about, like Thomas mentioned, what we can do with the Gary database, perhaps for other products. So I think you will hear in the future more about this, perhaps in the future in a joint presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Damir. So before I present the concluding remarks, I think we still have time for 2 questions from the public. Yes, Barbara, please.
Sorry for all the questions.
Do you have a microphone?
Okay, it's there. It's good.
I have a question for Thomas. Are you ready? As you said, the database covers all the handsets, and the manufacturers have cooperated to provide their details and so on. And for us, it has been useful. We have provided, a link to it. But I just wondered, did you have any proposal in respect of the problem whereby now we have a situation where we have this website with the ability to compare accessible features and so on, and we have then the service providers another tool to compare other features and prices and packages. So I'm just wondering if you had any proposals as to how that situation could be addressed. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
combine
Yeah.
these two.
Yeah.
Well, actually, unfortunately, the answer is very short, no. But I take it with me, and as I'm going to meet with our Secretary General next week, Michael Milligan, anyway, so it's a good opportunity to bring that up and to think about everything that was mentioned, and this will be then one point of that, and I can come back to you afterwards, so as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Is there any other question from the public? See at the back.
Hello, hi, I'm Jack from Ofcom. My question is from Damir. Specifically, one of the barriers that you've identified is the fact that demand for accessible products appears to be fragmented throughout Europe. So what do you specifically think could be a way to tackle that, to make the demand of accessible products appear more united across Europe?
What we saw is that there was a lot of discussion from the Commission side, like, you know, ICT, that's a big problem. There is no, I would say, some sort of unified treatment throughout the member states. Therefore, we need to regulate. And then we ask, okay, what do you mean we need to regulate? What exactly do you mean to regulate? On which side? Is it service? Is it device? Is it what? Or this is just define some sort of a standard, not technical standard, meaning kind of principles and standard, what should be some sort of minimum, and then everybody can build up upon this. I have to say we still do not have the proper answer to that. What we are a bit wary is that this doesn't end up in certain member states mandating certain requirements for certain products, but rather that we have some sort of then pan-European either rules or understanding or standard, whatever you want to call it, that everybody understands what are the, I would say, minimum, regardless how high you want to make the bar. That's, I think, for the discussion. And then based on this, if you have proper tools, like, for example, Gary database, then everybody can compare, for this and these features, in this and this region, I have this and these products, that goes beyond this minimum bar. That is something that we think could be the solution. And that's what we are trying to do. I'm not saying that we are particularly successful yet, but what I like is that we are basically quite serious about that. And just, I can also say just separately for my company side, that was very useful to hear some of the comments today here. In 2 weeks, I'm going to Seoul. So I will take a lot of these basically questions there and really face our people in R&D, in planning, in development, in marketing, and say, hey guys, that's exactly what you know. Civil society is telling us, what user groups is telling us, what regulators is telling us, and we think we should do this. What do you say? They will say yes, most likely. Why? Because this is what user wants, and this is what we have to follow. The only problem for us is that what we would definitely like to avoid is that we have something really very specific for Europe beyond what we can have as some sort of the global standard. We have to admit that because US simply have certain level of legislation, which I think is very nice, and it's implemented, they also made certain, let's say, level of, we can say, standard. Yes, there are companies that go beyond that standard, but there is a certain level of standard. And what we would like to say is that if you already have this nice standard, we are not saying that in Europe you should go below, not at all. But the point is, if we now invent something which is completely different in Europe, what does it make sense? That's our point. Our point would be, let's then base on something which we have, which is not bad at all. Everybody actually, what I hear for years says, yes, that's one of the possible good examples. Okay, let's then follow the best practices. And then let's see, can we use this type of the minimum standard as some sort of lock-in for all participants to innovate more? I think we heard also in previous panels some examples how this can work.
Thank you, Damir. So, if there are no more questions, I was charged with the task of delivering some concluding remarks here. My problem is that I think the workshop was very fruitful because now I have 11 pages of notes and action points for BEREC and for myself. Well, I will try. I will not go through the 11 pages, but I will go through some very brief general observations, and then I have identified also a number of more concrete action points that I would like to share with you all. So, as I understood what was said here, to have success in the promotion of equivalent access and choice, we need to cut some red tape, and we need more action by people championing the equivalent access and the equivalent choice ideals. Disability issues should not be considered a fait divers in regulation because those issues are frequently connected to market failures that are core to justifying the very existence of regulation. Success and the equivalent access and choice area demands that government and the regulators, to a certain extent, consider changing paradigm from what the economic literature classifies as benign or libertarian paternalism to a paradigm of more frequent and active cooperation with manufacturers, service providers, consumer associations, disability associations, and other entities. The free rider problem was mentioned the year before by Henk Manekens, I think. So what happens if one or two operators or manufacturers do not subscribe to the ideals of equivalent access and choice? Well, we are right to do our righteous work anyway. At the end of the day, even if, as Milton Friedman has said, the business of business is business, reputation nowadays counts a lot towards business profitability. So about concrete action points, I have identified, based upon the results of the proceedings of the workshop, 3 action lines and 9 measures that could be relevant for our future action. The 3 lines of action would be better monitoring, accessible information, and better regulation. Starting with better monitoring, the actions, I have identified 3 actions in this field. We need to develop a benchmarking exercise with relevant indicators which might contribute towards the solidification of our monitoring exercise at BEREC and by NRAs. To this effect, we would be very satisfied to count with the cooperation of the European Disability Forum, and here are also attending some experts of NRAs and of other consultancy firms which deal a lot with benchmarking exercises. So we are counting with all your cooperation to this effect. We also need, as it was already said in our first workshop, to gather and to develop more statistics and more updated statistics. And from what I have seen and from my empirical experience, the situation regarding the gathering of statistical data has not improved. Maybe it is even worse than a couple of years ago. So there is a lot of work to be done here, and a lot could be done in a more centralized level, for instance, by the European Commission. The third action point with regard to the better monitoring would be to update the BEREC report on equivalence for disabled end users. As of tomorrow, we are doing some internal procedures to collect from the NRAs more updated information, and in the course of our work, we would be happy to contact you to collect also more information and more relevant and updated information from the private sector. The second line of action has to do with accessible information, and I have taken 3 action points here. First, to improve the BEREC the website. It is important from what I have seen, and we promise, and I have spoken already with my colleagues to the BEREC office. When we have the next workshop, possibly the BEREC website will be much more user-friendly for disabled end users and for people in general. We also think it is important to improve the accessibility in the service providers and manufacturers' websites. We have seen here already some best practices, for instance, the Gary, which was presented by Mr. Barmuller. We think that, and this was said here before, that it would be important to employ more disabled personnel, both in the NRAs and in the service providers. This could contribute towards a more increased sensibility of people when dealing with accessibility and disability issues from a regulatory point of view. Finally, the last action point in the line of accessible information would be to promote measures, for instance, consumer guides, comparison websites that contribute towards supporting better decision-making by end users with disabilities. The final line of action, better regulation. What could we do here? Well, firstly, NRAs need to have a more regular and intense dialogue with other public entities which have responsibility over disability issues. In each country, very seldom it is the NRA which has the complete power and responsibility over disability issues, even in the electronic communications field. Secondly, we need to reinforce cooperation with disability associations, consumer associations, and with the private sector. And finally, it is important to promote universal design, industry-led technical standardization, and harmonized principles concerning equivalent access and choice, as well as, possibly, to re-examine conditions associated to general authorizations of service providers. So, thank you.